Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're getting into something fundamental, really. How much of who we are, how we act, comes down to our genes versus, our environment.
It's that classic nature versus nurture question, but maybe with a bit more nuance.
Exactly. We've got some material here on genetics and behavior, and the plan is to pull out the really key ideas for you. Keep it clear, keep it focused.
Yeah, we're looking at how our inherited stuff and our life experiences kind of weave together. That's essentially what behavioral genetics tries to unravel.
Okay, let's dive in. The sources mention inheriting building blocks instead of whole behaviors. Can you unpack that a bit? It's not like there's one gene for being introverted, right?
Exactly, no. It's much more indirect than that. Think about complex things like intelligence or, say, aggression. You don't inherit them directly.
So what do we inherit then?
Well, you inherit genes that influence your underlying physiology. Things like how your neurotransmitters work or your hormone levels. These are the basic components.
The building block.
The building blocks, precisely. So maybe you inherit genes linked to, say, a more sensitive stress response system.
Uh-huh.
But whether that actually leads to anxious behavior depends a lot on your environment, your experiences.
Got it. Like having the ingredients, but not the finished recipe.
That's a great way to put it. The genetic potential is there, but the environment often determines if and how it gets expressed. This gene-environment interaction is, well, absolutely central.
So our DNA isn't just a fixed blueprint that dictates everything.
Not at all. Think of it more like a dynamic script. The environment, your upbringing, social stuff, major life events, even subtle things, is constantly interacting with your genes.
And sometimes it needs an environmental trigger to, turn a gene on?
Sort of, yes. Or to influence its level of activity. A genetic tendency might exist, but without the right environmental cue, it might not really show up strongly or at all.
Okay, this feels like a good point to bring in that model. The diathesis stress model. It came up regarding depression.
Ah, yes. That's a perfect example of this interaction in action.
So what's the idea there?
The core idea is diathesis means a predisposition or vulnerability, often genetic. And stress refers to environmental stressors.
Okay.
So the model suggests someone might inherit a genetic vulnerability for depression, but that vulnerability alone might not be enough.
It needs a trigger.
Often, yes. It might take significant life stress like loss, trauma, chronic difficulty to sort of activate that underlying vulnerability and lead to the development of depression.
Ah, I see. So that helps explain why two people could go through similar tough times, but only one develops clinical depression. The underlying vulnerability matters.
Exactly. It highlights why looking at just genes or just environment is too simplistic. They work together.
And this complexity, I suppose, is why pinpointing specific genes for complex behaviors is so hard. The material mentioned the Human Genome Project.
Right, a massive achievement. Mapping all human genes back around 2004. Huge.
But knowing the map isn't the same as understanding how everything works together for something like behavior.
Right? Precisely. We have the parts list, you could say. But understanding how all those parts interact with each other and with countless environmental factors to influence something as complex as behavior, that's still a major ongoing challenge. We're still figuring out the recipes.
Which naturally leads to the limits of genetic testing for behavior right now. It's not like getting a test for, say, Huntington's disease, which has a clearer genetic cause.
Correct. For many single gene disorders, genetic testing can be very informative, even predictive. But for complex behavioral conditions like depression, schizophrenia, or even personality traits, the genetic contribution is spread across many, many genes, each often having a tiny effect.
And heavily influenced by environment.
And heavily influenced by environment. So current genetic tests just can't give us a simple yes or no answer, or even a reliable risk score for most complex behaviors. The picture's just far too intricate for that right now.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the single most important thing to take away from this deep dive? The main message.
I'd say it's that behavior is fundamentally about interaction. It emerges from this constant, complex dance between the genetic hand we're dealt, our predispositions, our building blocks, and the environments we encounter and shape throughout our lives. It's definitely not one or the other.
Nature through nurture, almost.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Really fascinating. Okay, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. Considering this intricate interplay, this dance, what everyday, maybe even subtle environmental things might be nudging our built-in tendencies one way or another, perhaps without us even noticing?
That's a great question to ponder.